Okay, you should have your biochemistry notes at your desk, which is entitled Macromolecules. We will start actually on the back side with the chemistry background. You should be looking at this on the top of the back page. You should see a pH scale, and you should see it goes from 0 to 14, with 7 being a neutral substance. So right up above the number 7, you need to type neutral. Neutral. A neutral substance is not an acid, and it's not a base. Bottled water would be an example of a neutral substance. An acid goes from 0 to a 6.9, which would be that little dot there right before the line at 7.0. Anything in this range is an acid. A stomach acid is around between a 2 and a 3. So this here is going to be a 2, this red line. So you need to add the red line, and you need to write the number 2 there, right up above stomach acid. So the pH in your stomach is around a 2. To give you a comparison, the pH of soda or coffee is around 4. So soda and coffee is half of as acidic as your stomach acid. Only 7.0 is neutral. So anything from 7.1 all the way to 14 is a base. And a base, 2 examples, we'll start with the bleach, is a 12. So you have to add this red line, put the number 12 up above bleach. So this is bleach, what's in a chlorine pool, what is put in the water that comes out of our tap. Very, very small amounts, but still there is bleach in that water to keep bacteria from growing when it's hanging out in the pipes before you turn the faucet on. Eggs are also a base. This here, blood, refers to this line just after 7. Blood is actually 7.4. So you should add a 7.4 right underneath that, the word blood. Blood has to remain at 7.4. It is an extremely weak base. Now, most of the foods we eat are actually acids. And our stomach is also acid. So our bodies actually make chemicals that allow the blood to stay at 7.4. Excuse me. In class, we'll do a little demo, and you guys will actually, each table will get to measure out the pH of one substance. So you just need strips for that, and then you read the results. So we'll do that in class. Now, the strong end of the scale is at the outsides. So a 0 is the strongest acid that's naturally made on Earth. That would be the acid of sulfuric acid. It's also the acid found in the stomachs of snakes, which is why they can digest bones and we can't. Our stomach acid is not strong enough. As you get further away from 0 and closer to 7, your acids get weaker. When you reach 7, you are neutral. You're not an acid. You're not a base. Once you hit 7.1, you're a very weak base, and you get stronger as you go towards the number 14. So the strongest base is 14. The strongest acid is 0. Now, to help with this, looking at your pH scale to yourself, which substance is the weakest acid of these 4 numbers? Hopefully, you can rule out A and B because both A and B are actually bases. So it's either C or D. And between 6.2 and 1.0, 6.2 is the closest to the 7, So that's going to be the weakest. Next question. Which is the pH of the strongest base? Well, first, we can eliminate C and D because they are both, D is an acid, C is neutral. The only base numbers are A and B. Of these two, the question asks for the strongest. That is B, 13. Between 11.1 and 13.0, 11 is the strongest base. Okay, buffers. This is in the large rectangle on the back of your note sheet. You write what's in blue. Buffers are chemical that maintain a constant or a balance of pH within living organisms. This is an example of homeostasis. Okay, so your blood must maintain a pH of 7.4. If it gets too far above 7.4, the base is too strong and it will start eating away your blood vessels. If it gets stronger than 7.4, so it goes actually down towards the 6 zone, then it's going to be too strong of an acid, and that will also eat through your blood vessels. So the blood pH is balanced. It's very important. And this is pictures of red blood cells. If you get heartburn, here's a picture of heartburn. Heartburn has nothing to do with your heart. It's what happens when your stomach squirts out a little bit of stomach acid. It could be because you ate too much. It could be because of bad posture. Or it could be in older people, their muscles get weaker, so the stomach opens up at the top, and when it squirts that acid out, your heart is literally right here. So it's called heartburn because it feels like your heart's on fire, but it's really not. If you have heartburn, you can take something called antacid, which is the opposite of an acid. So Pepto-Bismol will actually neutralize heartburn or an upset stomach. So will Rolaids. Other examples are Pepto-Bismol and milk of magnesia. All of them will neutralize this acid. Now, we talked about the definition of buffers, and I mentioned in the pH scale slide that there are buffers in your body. And red blood cells are actually buffers. Carbon dioxide is actually a weak acid. And it's produced in the mitochondria. Do you guys remember what happens in the mitochondria? What process? Is it respiration or photosynthesis? If you thought respiration, you're right. So it's aerobic respiration. The red blood cells take the carbon dioxide from your blood that have been released by the mitochondria, and they neutralize it so that the blood maintains a pH of 7.4. And a 0.2 change in either direction can actually be lethal. Now, underneath it, you have the word bonds, and there's two kinds. Covalent bonds, the orange is what you have to fill in the lines with. Covalent bonds are the strongest of all bonds, and you need an enzyme to break them apart. Muscles or protein would be an example of covalent bonds. So would lipids or fats, so would carbohydrates or carbs. And it takes stomach acid, start breaking the bonds of the food, and then when you go into the food goes into the small intestines, you have a bunch of enzymes that are produced to digest your food. You have to have the enzymes. If you don't, you cannot break covalent bonds. So they are the strongest of all bonds. This would be like walking down the hall, locking fingers with your significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend, or best friend, and someone walks in between you. If you've got your fingers interlocked, most likely that person is not going to be able to break the bond between your hands. And they're going to probably all kind of run into you, and then it's going to kind of make a mess because your hands won't break apart. But that's like a real strong bond. Hydrogen bonds are the weakest of bonds, and here the pink word goes in the blank. And it's obviously by its name. Hydrogen bonds involve a connection that always involves hydrogen. This chemical down here, the red O's with the two lines and the H's attached to them, this is one molecule of water, H2O. The covalent bond is between the hydrogen and the oxygen. The hydrogen bond bonds one water molecule to another water molecule. So this hydrogen bond is involved this hydrogen to this oxygen, and it holds one water molecule to another. This is why it takes a long time to boil water. If you're going to make a giant pot of pasta, it takes a long time to bring that water to boil. And I'm going to prove to you how strong hydrogen bonds are with another activity in class. This right here, you see this insect is literally standing on top of the water. The hydrogen bonds are so strong that this insect, actually the legs are making little dimples in the water, but the bug's not falling through. We as people are obviously too large. Hydrogen bonds do not help us float. Here's a cooler with some frozen bottles of water. Now, have you ever put a frozen bottle of water in the freezer? Or maybe the bottle of soda? What happens to that liquid as it freezes? Does it take up less volume in the container, or does it take up more? Okay, hopefully, if you've ever done this, you know it takes up more. So if you want to freeze a bottle of water, you have to get rid of the top third of it first. And then when it freezes, it will increase in volume to take up the entire container. That is because of hydrogen bonds. And it's a good thing, because if water was not less dense, ice was not less dense than water, then ice cubes would sink. And in the winter, when you have lakes and ponds and oceans, they would freeze from the bottom up, and all fish and life in the water would die. But we all know that it doesn't work that way. You get a thin layer of ice across the top of the pond. That's because ice is less dense than water. These hydrogen bonds elongate and cause that to happen. And we'll do a demo in class on that too, to help you see that, especially if you've never frozen a bottle of water before. Now, you do not have to draw anything on this slide. We're discussing it only. The solid lines are all covalent bonds. So this C is a carbon, and it has a double bond with this O, which is oxygen. But this same C has a single bond with this oxygen over here. And the bond between this O and this H, hydrogen, is not drawn, but it's still there. So this is all covalent bonds. The H is hydrogen, the O is oxygen, the C is carbon, and the N is nitrogen. It's all the first letter of the words. So this would take an enzyme to break. This is one molecule of fat. When we gain weight, this carbon chain here, we call it hydrocarbon because there's got a whole bunch of hydrogens and a whole bunch of carbons all covalently bonded together. When we gain weight, this chain of carbons gets longer. When we lose weight, this chain of carbons gets smaller. Fat can grow or get bigger indefinitely. So you actually this takes energy and enzymes and effort to break this fat molecule up. Number 2 and 3 are hydrogen bonds. This is water, and this one molecule, one water molecule in the center is bonded to 4 other water molecules. And it's a hydrogen bond because they always get a dotted line because they're really, really light bonds. It's like you walking down the hall holding pinky fingers with your best friend. If someone accidentally bumps into you, you're going to break that connection because the pinky's one of your weakest fingers. Number 3 is a molecule of DNA. And these letters, C's, G's, T's, and A's, are the genetic code, which makes you different than any other organism on Earth. These red lines are hydrogen bonds. So the code is the letters, and the hydrogen bond is what joins those letters together. And the reason for that is, as we already know, in asexual reproduction, your DNA is replicated or copied during interphase. The reason that's possible is because of these carbon bonds. This molecule will untwist and these hydrogen bonds immediately break so that it can be replicated or copied. So hydrogen bonds get dotted lines or dashed lines. Covalent bonds get solid lines. Covalent bonds are the strong ones, and you need an enzyme to break them down. And we'll talk more details about enzyme next week. Now, here's another picture. This is actually an activity that you guys are going to be doing. If you look at this penny, you can see how the water bubbles up on top of the penny. That's because of hydrogen bonds. Here's the actual example, the diagram of this penny. Because all these hydrogen bonds in between water molecules, the water can actually defy gravity and create this bubble. And you are going to be seeing how many paper clips you can float on top of a water in a cup. And you're going to prove just how strong those hydrogen bonds are. Now, at the very bottom of your note sheet, you have in a box area, you have all of this information. So I'm going to say it, you're going to have to write it down. There's the biggest title of this section is macromolecules, and it has two different names. So the first name is macromolecule. Macro is underlined, and this arrow going down to this line, you need to write the word large. So in this first blank, write large. So macro means large. Molecule is the second part of this word, and molecule is a chemical. So in this long line here goes the word chemical. So macromolecule in common non-science terms means large chemical. This would be all of your foods, your sugars or carbohydrates, your proteins, your lipids or fats, okay, your nucleic acids or your DNA. They're macromolecule. There's large chemicals. AKA means also known as polymer. Poly is a word, polymer is actually from your math class. Do you remember what poly means in math? Means the same thing here. So this arrow here, you need to write in this line here the word many. So polymer means many. In science, we use the word mer with this, and a mer is a unit. So this is unit. So polymer means many units. Okay, so let me explain what that means. A protein is a macromolecule. It is a large chemical made up of many units. The units in proteins are called amino acids. Those of you that are athletes, you may have eaten or had to drink a protein shake before. Protein shakes have protein powder, which are aminos. It's amino acid in powder form, already digested, so that you can drink it. It can be immediately metabolized and given to your muscles to build muscles. So these words both fit. And the EOC, just like with aerobic respiration or cellular respiration, it's going to force you to know the difference. Okay, so a macromolecule is a large chemical that's made up of many units, polymers. And macromolecules are also called organic chemicals. And the definition of an organic chemical is anything that contains carbon. So back here, all of these C's are carbons. So this is an organic molecule. This here is the base of an amino acid, and it also has C's in there, carbons. Okay, letter A, along with carbon, capital C, these chemicals also have hydrogen, which is in this blank, capital A, and oxygen, capital O. Okay, so all macromolecules they always have carbon. They usually have also hydrogen and oxygen. Some macromolecules also have nitrogen or the letter N. Proteins and nucleic acids are examples of macromolecules that have nitrogen in them. All organisms, especially animals, excrete nitrogen in their liquid waste. For us, it's humans. In humans, it is urine. If you're a bird, it's uric acid. If you're a reptile or a bat, it would be guano. So it's all called different names, but it's nitrogen. And that's all the proteins and the DNA that we eat every day that we don't need. Now, the building blocks in number 2, the building blocks of macromolecules / polymers, so polymers, polymers, have several names. Monomer means one unit. So poly means many, mer means unit. Mono means one. Sometimes the EOC will use the word subunit or unit. So there's a lot of different names that are used off and on here. I'm going to be using them for the next 2 weeks, and then after the test, I'm still going to use them. So by the time we get to the EOC, it should be familiar. And that's it for today's lesson. Okay. There it is.